So firstly, I'd like to say thank you very much for being given the opportunity to comment on this really interesting and fascinating piece of work from the perspective of the innovation landscape. I've probably been involved in facilitating various bits of innovation in various different environments for more years than I care to remember. So I think, yeah, it's quite an interesting thing to take a view on. From my perspective, I think that there are a couple of reasons why typically somebody will look to innovation. And it will either be because somebody turns around and says that productivity isn't where it needs to be, something's going on at a sector level and perhaps we can do something differently, make or save some money, or there's sort of this disruptive fear, the fear of the unknown. And I think in the last year we've all seen that there are some fairly unpredictable futures that we don't know about. So typically you'll get asked to do something like create a crowdsourced innovation program for 27,000 people, or set up some design sprints, or go and have a look at whether or not we need an incubator or an accelerator, or in my latest exciting challenge, working with higher education to look at the future innovation space. And all of it throws up a number of questions. Is there leadership alignment? And typically at the point that somebody's thinking about innovation, there's something happened in the sector that has driven an organisation to think about this, and the leadership will say, yeah, okay, we all agree that's a threat. Is there an organisational opportunity? And therefore, is there the willingness to invest on that particular level in terms of the organisation in question? Now, given all those things have been answered, you then come to that really easy part, which is the delivery, right? Okay, no problem there. But actually, that's where the layers of complexity start. You know, you would think the other things are complex, and trying to do anything without them in place introduces complexity. But actually, when you actually look down at what is the problem, you quite often then find that people turn to trying to solutionize. So they don't really think what's the problem in very clear and concise statements. They either go down a rabbit hole or they really are unable to articulate. They find it very difficult to perhaps translate that sometimes into a business need, let alone into a technology enablement requirement. And furthermore, you know, when you look at the art of the possible, based on the potential between where you are and where you could be based on what's out there in the marketplace at sector level, it becomes really difficult for people to understand how you apply those scenarios to their own organisations. So when I had a look at this piece of work, I found it really absolutely fascinating. And for me, there's sort of three really big takeaways that resonate. Firstly is around the applicability of design sprints themselves as a fantastic tool to enable collaboration. And I think, you know, the key thing that I would say here is around the way that you can bring clients, the supply chain, technology experts, people from all across the organisation, irrelevant of hierarchy, to really come together and creatively work using this toolkit and some of these techniques around thinking about the solution to the particular problem. And it can help you frame the problem and look at the solution for the problem. So I think it becomes a really practical, really useful, really collaborative toolkit. And I think that is something that is much needed in this space. I think secondly is around the recognition on skills. I think it was Bruce who sort of said this is about organisational insurance, and I really like that term. But, you know, when we talk about futurists or creative strategists, it quite often sounds like a job title or an activity that is very far removed from our day-to-day world. But actually being able to vision and think about the future and your place in it is really important. And you know, something I've often observed over the last few decades of work is that the knowledge curation around markets, clients, even on organisations themselves, is typically quite poor. And therefore the baseline for innovation on an organisational level is quite challenging. So when you bring these design sprints groups together and you have creative strategies and futurists and scenarios as part of it, you introduce a really new set of skills and a different set of thinking. And I think that's the second takeaway for me about how critical that really is. And I think that once you've built that capability in-house, and whether that is somebody that you contract to or whether it really genuinely is somebody that you have in-house, you suddenly have that ability to form an innovation roadmap. And I think Richard said earlier, this is far wider in terms of its applicability than just the potential introduction of one advanced technology that happens to be AI. This methodology can go beyond that. So it becomes scalable and repeatable. And therefore, in terms of actually making that investment in this methodology and the skills to enable it, it becomes really worthwhile. And I think for me, that third takeaway, therefore, is around the ability to actually drive the adoption and the embedding of any innovation as part of a business model. If I look back over lots of the different projects that I've been involved with, quite often they'll become something that happens alongside the main organisation, and actually integrating the solution into the larger organisation becomes a new complex challenge in itself. And so I think this methodology actually gives you a guidance, this framework around how you can drive this as part of a business model. And for me, that's really critical, because that starts to close that gap between the potential and the reality of anything when it comes to innovation. So in this case, it's AI. What's the potential? What's the reality of it in an organisation? But it could equally be other things, such as, randomly, let's talk about the property world, the use of drones for surveying. We all know that drones fly around. How many of them are used in surveying? It's increasing massively, but the potential is huge. So, lots and lots of examples that we could cite about potential versus reality against lots and lots of advanced technologies. And I think with those three takeaways around the design sprints themselves, the skills, and that bringing it into a business model approach, it will lead to success, and that leads to impact, which therefore leads to productivity and growth. And ultimately, I think that's the aim of the outcome of the project. So, yeah, absolutely brilliant to have had the opportunity to read this and comment on it. So thank you very much.